If the government does not come to a decision tonight about the next funding budget, the government will actually shut down. So let's talk about what this means because there's a lot of news going on around it. And this typically creates a lot of anxiety for a lot of folks because this is an uncertain time period for many, many people. So breaking down the facts, the biggest impact that this will actually affect is really going to be public workers. If the government can't come to a decision and the government shuts down, about 800,000 public workers will be furloughed without pay temporarily until the government reopens. Now, 800,000 people does seem like a big number. On the grand scheme of things in the entire economy, this is actually a pretty small number. And I'm not saying this to diminish the importance that public workers provide to the economy. And of course, I would never want to see any public worker lose their job because Congress can't get their act together. That's always very unfortunate. It's really just for me to say that on the grand scheme of things, this won't affect the actual economy too much. And there have been analysts' predictions about this saying that roughly on average, for every week or so that the government is shut down, it really only affects about 0.1% of GDP. Every day and every week that this goes by, it actually only has a very minuscule effect on overall GDP slowdown, so gross domestic product. Additionally, the US government since 1977 has actually not been able to come to an agreement on 20 separate occasions. I know, shocker, the government can't make a decision. Big surprise. But what that means is that this is actually pretty common from a historical market standpoint. And on average, the shutdown only lasts for about 8 days. So it is a short time period. I will say for this time period specifically, it is a little bit more challenging because the Fed is relying on a lot of key data. A lot of key data actually is generated from public sources like the CPI Institute. And if there's any sort of shutdown and public employees that are working on compiling census data and economic data, if that data is not released in a timely fashion, it does create the Fed's job to be more difficult because they don't have that data current to be able to make decisions on futures interest rate changes. And of course, this does have some stronger implications now because the Fed has really struggled to get inflation under control. And we are seeing a slowdown in the economy, not toward a recession, but definitely a slowdown with weaker jobs data these last few months. So with that in mind, hopefully the government can come to a decision, but we'll definitely talk more about it next week. But in the meantime, let's just keep our eyes peeled and see what happens down in Washington, D.C.